thank everyone for their flexibility in starting this meeting an hour later in order to accommodate the Hopkins baseball playoff schedule. Really appreciate the flexibility there. Okay, thank you everyone for being here at the Monday, May 18th meeting of the Hadley Public Schools. Do I have a motion to open the meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Christine.
Seconded.
Thank you, Ethan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Terrific. Annie, can you take us through any adjustments to the agenda?
We do not have any adjustments to the agenda this evening.
Wonderful. Okay, moving next to public comment. If there are members of the public here and they would like to make a comment, please raise your digital hand and we will unmute you. Okay, seeing none, we're going to move right to presentation and discussion items. First up is the AI competency framework, and here to tell us about that is Principal Camuso. April, welcome.
Thank you. Would you like me to share the slides as I talk through them a little bit? Is that helpful or helpful?
That would be helpful, yes.
Recording.
Thank you.
I have that power in here.
You should. You're a co-host. You should be able to share yours. Because you are up a creek. If you're relying on me, take it from our venerable chair.
Let me
All these years into Zoom, I think you got it, Annie.
Just hit the share button at the bottom of the Zoom screen and then.
Yeah, my computer wants me to allow, I have to allow it in my settings.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. So much security.
I could also share it.
Let's see if that works.
Would you like to share it?
Give me one sec. I think I changed this setting, and if not, yeah, I'm good now.
Okay, terrific.
If not, you will have to see you do that, but nope, not the little AI guy. Allow, click allow, slideshow. There we go.
Terrific.
All right. So the first thing that we're talking about tonight is the generative AI competency plan at Hopkins. And I'm going to take us through a little bit how we put it together and then talk a little bit about what's in the plan and then see if you all have questions at the end of that. I also should be honest and just say that my initial feelings about generative AI were pretty negative, and the original guidance in the school was to absolutely never use it in any way at all, ever. And so we've certainly shifted our position from that, although I personally would still live in a world without it entirely. I recognize that is not the world that we live in. So Annie really tasked us with trying to think about, if this is going to exist in the world, then we want it to work for us and our students. And so how are we going to make that happen? So I got together with a small group, a small committee at Hopkins, Susan Duncan and Nick Dowd, who both have a fair amount of experience in AI, have taken some coursework in AI, and also lead a lot of our Project Lead the Way coursework at Hopkins, which also involves some generative AI use. So they were a part of that committee and the curriculum development. And then Dan Vreeland was the other member of that committee as well, who I guess similar to me, but more knowledgeably than me, I would say, shifted from no AI to, how do we use this in the classroom? And he's been experimenting with that throughout the year with his students. So we worked together to say, if we had to have an AI competency framework, what would be in this? What are the major competencies that we want to teach? And then what would some example content be within that? Of course, Susan Duncan and Nick Dowd have both talked a lot about how AI is constantly changing. So we have a framework, and I think the competencies themselves are a little bit more important than the content, because some of that content might always stay the same, right? When we're talking about thinking about credibility of information, but some of it might also change or be built upon as generative AI continues to develop over time, and as the uses of it also continue to develop over time. So we've talked about how we have this framework, but like all curriculum, it's still a living document, and it's something that we have to continually check on. So we worked together to figure out what would those competencies be, what might the content be, and then more specifically, a part of Annie's dream was to have every student have access to this, so that if you're going to Hopkins, you're going to get all of these competencies and all of this curriculum before you graduate. And so the way to do that without having to add another course, because as you could imagine, adding another course can also be a challenge in a small school setting. The more requirements you have, the less flexibility it creates for students. So the way that we did that was looking at courses that exist already, that all students already take, and then saying, you know, where in here does it make sense to teach which competency? And so when you're looking at the framework, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing in 7th grade strategies for learning, we feel like these competencies make sense. And then Susan Duncan and Sue teaches that course. And so she'll be teaching some of those competencies. Later on, you might see competencies about data awareness and data permanence. And we've lined that up with where they might be doing research in a 8th or 9th grade English class, where they're already talking about some of those similar concepts or ethics. I think there's an ethics competency when they're doing Health 9. So we tried to align it naturally to where some of those conversations are already happening, and then thinking about how to expand upon that. So that was the first thing that we did. And then essentially we went through stages of feedback and revision. We shared the competency framework with staff at a PD day, where we also did some work with AI. I think Annie had shared some of that information with you all from that day. And then I also shared it with my school council to get some of their feedback, which is composed of 2 parents, a staff member, and 2 students. So they shared some of their thoughts about, you know, that and how it was looking. We made some revisions to that and shared it again with staff again, so that they had the information about that. Susan Duncan recently shared it with her Project Lead the Way engineering class for some feedback from the students. And now we are sharing this with you to see if you all have any questions, because we plan to roll it out this fall. So that's the sort of plan for the fall. Again, thinking about integrating AI competencies, we always want to make sure that Hopkins students are very prepared and very competitive for the world around them. So again, whether or not I personally want to live in a world with generative AI, it exists. And if it exists, it means I want to know how it works and how we can make sure that our students are using it appropriately, how we can make sure that our students are prepared for their future jobs, some of which, you know, might rely heavily on it. But even if they don't, you know, I went to that AI panel recently where I admitted to them all, if you all haven't figured out by now, that I use AI regularly for my social media posts. Like, that is not my skill set. I know it's important to have social media. I know that families like it, and I have way more Facebook followers than I do in my personal one. So that's great. People in the community love pictures of the kids and whatnot. But you know, that's a place for me as a single administrator where I think it makes sense to outsource that piece of my job. So I've certainly shifted a lot of my own thinking, excuse me, around that over time. And I want our students to be prepared, and so does Annie. And so did everybody on the task force committee that was working on this. Excuse me. DESE also released that AI literacy for educators and talked a lot about their values, and a lot of their values too around academic integrity. And so generative AI and academic integrity don't have to be separate, right? Like, we can think about how to be using it through thinking about explicit modeling and very explicit expectations, right? When is it okay? When is it not? What does that look like? And we've been doing a lot of that work in our leadership team as well. And I've been sharing some examples with those department chairs about like what it looks like to be explicit and where is the line and what's too much. So all of that to say, we've developed this grade level competency plan that's 7 through 10. The grades 11 and 12 are extension. And so that might be a place where a student might be taking more advanced coursework or Project Lead the Way coursework, or a capstone that they might delve into trying to do some problem solving and work. And there's some examples in here about what some of that might look like. And then the other competencies, right, are all the 7 through 10 standard ones that students are getting in their courses. And you all had that document linked, I think, to look at it more closely as well. After today, we have a few things that we're still working on. So some of the feedback from school council was about making sure that families understand generative AI, that they understand how it works, they understand what's being asked of their students, what's, you know, okay use and not okay use, but even just things like, you know, basic safety. When I was growing up, it was like you weren't allowed to be in a chat room. You couldn't talk to strangers. My mom would have a breakdown. It was like, you absolutely can never go in a chat room. And, you know, of course, it's very different now. So times change, but like families understanding, right? There are some large language models that are more safe than others. And our district has particular generative AI programs that we use for specific reasons. We are not advocating that students use ChatGPT, for example. It's wildly unsafe. It doesn't have the safety boundaries that we need to have. So families certainly can make their own decisions about that, but we think providing them some information would be smart. So thinking about how to do that, developing specific course curriculum maps, units, and lessons. So some teachers will work on that over the summer. Similarly, the students that are in high school that are going to miss some of these foundational grades will get some larger chunked lessons from someone like Ms. Duncan or Mr. Dowd. And so we'll develop some of that coursework over the summer, similar to like what they might do in advisory, but we'll make sure to target those particular grades so that they get that backfilled information that they would be missing otherwise. We are also going to continue to update our AI guidance, which again currently says, you really shouldn't be hardly ever using AI. And so we're going to change some of the language and thinking around that. We also are going to work on an acceptable and not acceptable use document that we are basing on some work from the College Board. The College Board has their own sort of examples of here's an acceptable use, here's one that's not, which we think is really helpful. Again, we advocate for every assignment, you're still saying in this specific assignment, this is what's acceptable and not, because it can still vary by assignment, or it could vary by teachers. The other thing we talked about at the AI panel, for example, was one of the professors said, I think it's great to use AI to generate an idea for a research paper or topic, and my inner English teacher was like, no, you absolutely can't do that. And then I thought about it and I said, well, when I give kids a list of topics, aren't I kind of doing that? I just am the generative AI, right? So again, thinking about when and why I'm using it. Okay, if you have a student who requires that scaffold, right, you can teach them, like, for you, this is how I'm differentiating. So we see a lot of great potential in terms of differentiation with AI. And so thinking about those for kids, though, being very clear in advance, like this is a project where you can use it for this. This is a project where you can't, or differentiating and saying for this group of students, you can. So kind of figuring out those pieces and what that might look like. We've also talked a bit about whether or not there's a potential AI certification assessment or test, like an end test that students can take. I think there's some interest in lining up with some partners, and I know that Annie has spent some time talking to Jeff Riley about some different things and the MIT Day of AI and other stuff. So we're exploring some ideas around that. And then continuing to provide staff with opportunities to practice. The staff are in wildly different places with their own generative AI knowledge and comfort. So again, it really starts with them in the classroom. Mr. Vreeland uses the Khan Writing Coach for all of his essays for his students, which I think is great. But he's pretty much the only teacher who's still doing that regularly. So thinking about how to continue to provide opportunities, right? So we had that PD where I said, log into DFID and try creating these materials and try doing this thing. And when you give staff that dedicated time, I think it's helpful. So we've been talking about, and I know Annie's going to get into more on the PD end, some time in the fall to give teachers some more time with that. So that's the sort of overall thinking, what we've done, what we're looking to do. We're excited to roll it out. It's definitely a little, I think, nerve-wracking. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute because, like with anything, it's a change. And, I still think there's plenty of things that I write that should be my personal writing. My graduation speech that I'm going to give will 100% be mine. Just that's important to me. Not everyone out there believes that that's an important thing. But I think, for us really figuring out with students, what are the places where we're developing a skill and we don't want to replace it, right? We want AI to help be a tool to make students' work better, but not replace their work or replace their thinking. So I think it's definitely a little bit of uncharted territory, but in many ways the same, right? I used that example recently about spell check that people, I'm sure, didn't love spell check when that first came out. Now everybody relies on spell check. So obviously this is a little more complicated, but it's one of those things, if we don't figure out how to make it work for us and how to make sure our students are safe with it, like they're using it anyway. So it makes more sense to approach it that way. So any questions that you all have, I'm happy to take, and I can take some notes or comments, and I can bring it back to the team. And just wanted to share the update of where we're at.
April, I want to thank you for your leadership in this area and taking a very pragmatic approach. That if we understand it, we can help our students navigate the bounds of when it's appropriate use and when it's not, and their entire lives will be changed by AI. So we've always been on the front end with understanding how the world around us is changing and helping our students be prepared for that. So I thank you for going into this uncharted territory, despite how nerve-wracking it is as an educator or as a parent, seeing what's coming down the pike. I'm going to open it up to questions from my colleagues, and starting first is Christine Pipp.
I just, actually, this past weekend, I encountered an issue with AI where I needed to know when the University of the SUNY Albany's graduation was and what time it started. And it said it was May 16th at 11. And I was looking this up on May 15th and it started at 10. So I think that just having kids question the competency of AI and having them be able to verify and learning how to verify whether or not AI is telling them the correct thing, that in itself is a huge skill that I think is important for the kids to master, because it is new technology. It is always changing, and it's not going to be 100% correct. It's like sort of like with Wikipedia, where the kids all started depending on it and then realized that that wasn't exactly it wasn't a good source, and it wasn't a reliable source. So I think that getting, starting them off with these skills is great. And I do agree that I'm not a huge fan of AI, but I think that it's something that is very useful when used correctly.
Yeah. And your example, Christine, is a great example of why it's so important to help educate students, right? Because large language models are trained on a specific data set, and that data set is typically not current, right? It's typically a couple years old. So a specific kind of question like that of when is this upcoming thing happening, AI very likely will not get correct. Or shouldn't get correct. And so students don't necessarily know that, right? So if we don't teach them, this is how it works, and each large language model, right, has a different date of here's the information that I know up until, and here's a different set of data I've been trained on, right? Which is why we talk about biases in it, helping them to understand it doesn't know everything just because, they are in this, they grew up with that sort of Google mentality of being able to find out any information, but that basic skill of questioning it, right? Whether it was a print text or Wikipedia or the internet or generative AI now, they need to be able to question and think critically at all times. So I think,
It's
to that
critical thinking.
point, yeah, that competency in and of itself isn't ever going to change.
Right.
Thanks, Christine. Other questions and comments?
I'm going to point a question. I do think, April, it's great that we're getting into this and defining this. Do you foresee, do you foresee a full list of sites that the kids can use that's sort of maintained, or is that's almost going to be impossible to do? Because it's already hard. I'm discovering new AI tools every day.
Yeah.
But then there's also the equity issue, right? Are we paying for these things? Because a lot of these things aren't free. And if there's an inequity of some kids can use some things that are behind a firewall, but they can afford it while others can't. How do we address those concerns?
Yeah. I think those are great questions. I definitely don't have a full answer. I know we've thought about, the district has certain tools. So we've thought about, for example, opening Gemini up to students in the fall. It's open to teachers, opening it to students in the fall with the rollout of these competencies. Currently, they don't have access to it. And so we've talked a lot about how, Gemini is within our Google Suite, something we already have. It's something that we can monitor and have access to. It's one of the reasons I like Con Writing Coach. We have the entire transcript of the conversation. And so I think we will continue with tools, just like we always have, that say, here's a tool that the district is using, like Noodle Tools, right? We still have Noodle Tools accounts so that students can have access to that research programming. And I imagine we'll continue to do that so that we have specific tools for students to use. I guess students have always been able to have access to purchase other things, whether it's technology or tutors on their own. So I'm not sure how that will work in this specific context, but I think that's a helpful question to think about, right? Like I, in my UMass work, pay for a special feature in Mendeley where it summarizes an article for me slightly more than what the abstract says, and then it links it to different parts in the article. So if I want a little more of, do I really want to read this article? Because my professor told me that my English teacher brain needs to stop and I need to stop reading and annotating every word in every article. So I'm like, okay, this tool will help, but I paid for it, right? I'm paying every month for this
Right.
feature. So I think that's a great question because we also don't know where those features are going to go.
Yeah. Good.
And so I think that gives us something really helpful that we can talk about as a leadership team that we have not yet discussed as much. Thank you.
Well, I think that just the second point is that follow-on thing, and you kind of get to this about sort of prompt writing, but it's not just, I think with AI, right, there's a lot of sayings, right? It's not like AI is going to take your job in the near future, but somebody who uses AI is going to take your job. So hence the literacy piece. But it's also, if AI can answer questions and solve problems, the future problem is going to be what problems to solve. And so so in that way of framing the future for the kids, it's not just how do I use ChatGPT and write the right prompt. It's how do I think about what the problem is that I'm really trying to address, and use whatever tool is readily available, or create tools. Right. That's the other thing and there's a bit in there, but I know it's just a general framework. But how do you use AI to create tools to solve problems? That's sort of an obvious step, right? Elliot, my youngest, in a coding class, it was all Claude Code.
Mhm.
That's the college level course. They're not teaching them how to code anymore. They're teaching them how to use AI to code. So it's already about how do you use the tool to get you one step ahead.
If I could just build on that, if I could just build on that.
Yeah.
So a couple of things with that. One is that we did as a leadership team start with a set of questions. Like basically, what is the problem we're trying to solve? I also echo what you're saying, Paul. My goal is that students who graduate from Hadley Public Schools are not just excellent problem solvers. A lot of people can be adept problem solvers. I want to graduate kids who are the world's best problem finders. Right. So you need to be a problem solver to be a good problem finder, but we're creating problem finders. Students, we do have other tools, again, in this rollout, things like Google Colab and other similar to what Elliot is using. He's using Claude for coding, but Google Colab does something similar to that. And so we are dreaming big. And I do want to say to families out there that I also know that there's a considerable amount of articles and folks who are concerned, worried about too much screen time, AI in schools. What does this mean? I mean, the bottom line for me, as you all know, thank you, April, for saying that I encouraged this, but really it was Humera who encouraged it. I mean, honestly, I'd be reading a book by an oil lamp and riding a horse, but that's not the future. It's designed for the next generation. So what I know, when I saw an article that said, I mean, salary premiums years ago was somewhere between like 20 and 30%. For not going out and coding, but having AI skills to apply to other fields, not even tech related fields. So what we know is I don't get to make decisions for students, right? My job is to make sure they're the best prepared. It was a great question on equity. We can can discuss that more, but I just wanted to build on what you had said about that is the vision. Problem solvers, yes, but ultimately we are going to graduate the world's finest problem finders.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul and Annie. Tara. I want to call on you because your audio is unmuted, but you look kind of frozen. So
Can
are
you
there?
hear me?
Yes, yes, we can
Am
hear
I
you.
back?
You're back. Are we back for you? Maybe not.
It's frozen again.
Ah,
Tara, you're
can you
back.
hear me?
Yes.
Am I
yes, we
better
can hear
now?
you. Yes, you're better now.
So I have unstable internet. I will leave my camera off. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I feel like a lot of topics have already been discussed. And point on access. And so I feel as though the school has a good starting point by I don't want to use the word dictating. Um, up Gemini to students in the fall. So saying these are acceptable uses of AI right now. I also would encourage us.
Tara, we have a spotty connection for you. I'm going to ask you to give your comments again because you always have such wise words. So I'm going to, maybe you could just troubleshoot for a little bit longer, maybe even restart your connection. We're going to come back to you. I hope that's all right.
Yes, it's all right.
Thank you, Tara. Ethan.
No questions, but I just want to applaud you, April, and the whole team on taking this on because I see it every day how challenging AI is in the classroom in the schools, and I think we just have to do our best to try and keep up with the children because they are moving at a speed that we're not really able to keep up with, especially with this technology. So at least getting this ahead of time and doing it as a group, as a school, I think is really important.
Thank you.
Ethan. Tara.
I don't know. It might be my internet. I will forfeit my
You're okay now.
discussion.
Let's try.
Okay. I will try to be super duper quick. We don't know what you heard. So kind of providing the framework, which it sounds like April's already kind of thinking about the ball rolling. Sorry, now you're gonna hear my dog with his squeaker. So that we're allowing kids appropriate tools. And that will help mitigate some of that at home use. See me. Of different tools, but I think you're right. I don't think we can always control that. Second, our policy, having it, I hate to say somewhat broad because I feel like this is going to be an ever changing topic and resources are going to be changing and guidance is going to be changing. And so it's going to have to be something somewhat fluid. And I wouldn't want that to hold you back, especially at the high school, from utilizing something because we're in the middle of updating a policy, but maybe keeping us abreast of where you are with this information. And then just to end it really quickly, I mean, AI really, I don't use it as much in the healthcare field, but my husband, who is in tech, will tell you, and if he were here, he'd have you on for the next 2 hours talking about it. Work smarter, not harder.
Mhm.
He uses AI, went from not using AI a year ago much at all to basically using AI in his job every day, and recognizing that what you ask and what you input for information and how good a question you ask is how good of an answer you're going to get. That's what I've learned from him too. So knowing what's accurate and what's not, because he can ask it to write a document and he can go through and he'll have to fact check it and go, I gotta fix this, I gotta fix that, I gotta fix this. But it's a great tool for him to not have to sit there and write a whole document and to go in and fact check it and adjust it, but it gives him that good basic guidance of framework. And I find that potentially useful for on an IEP who might struggle to get a topic started even, right? Who need that basic framework outlined for them in order to help them kind of figure out where to navigate. So I think I don't know that I'm excited because I think it's a lot of unknowns, but I think it's super important that we provide this opportunity for our kids to learn.
Thank you, Tara. I'll just round out our comments by saying I agree with everything that's been said so far. I will add that, yes, our large language models were trained in data and writings that were done a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades ago. And it's well understood that what AI spits out is writing that that sounds like it was written in the 80s and 90s and 2000s. And our students, for our students to have that lens and to understand how spoken word changes over time and how they want to distinguish themselves from everyone else who might be using AI by focusing on creating new literature, creating new ways, and putting out new works that will define next to decades models, and also just, be a trailblazer in that sense. I think that's really important. I know we're a Google house, and so I'll first say that Google has a product called Notebook LM, which is an excellent tool for research, and I use it as a thinking partner for processing like conversations after the fact using their podcast feature. It's excellent for so many different applications. I would highly encourage us, if we haven't introduced that to our students, to check it out. But because we're a Google house, and most K-12 institutions are, given Google Classroom and the pandemic and how they stepped up to solve that need very quickly, it puts us a little bit at a disadvantage if we don't round out the portfolio of what we're exposing our students to, because the world of work is going to be using a different suite of tools and an array of different suites of tools, and that will present a challenge in how we expose students to that. One of my university innovation fellows actually was hired by Stanford University, the Graduate School of Education, to lead something called the AI Tinkery. Imagine a makerspace meets AI. They hold programs and have a cadre of about 20 students who go out and train staff from all over Stanford and faculty from across Stanford, because the students know more than we do. And they can, with some guidance, hold excellent workshops for educators. So I see a lot of students in the program that I had founded doing that. It's a really effective way, and also to empower them. The best way to learn is to teach. So putting students in the driver's seat of teaching small workshops or small modules could be a really interesting way for them to codify their own understanding of how these large language models work and how the tools themselves are differentiated from one another. The other thing that would be interesting, kind of like the AI Tinkery example that I gave you, is for our Learning Commons, our reinvented library, to become a place where we have subscriptions on computers that students can either borrow overnight or use in the library. And that could be a way to address some of the inequity challenges. It might be interesting to prototype that for a few months and see what having a few subscriptions could do. Those are some things that come to mind for me. I really think it's important that we are training the next generation of problem finders, and also, futurists, those who can imagine new possibilities, right? Designers, but designers who can think 1, 2, 3 steps ahead of what the unintended consequences are of some of the technologies and practices that we're engaging in, but also some of the amazing potential that exists. And it reminds me of the 2000s and the dot-com era. We're in an explosive phase of growth and new opportunity, and our students, when supported properly, could be a part of making that happen. And that's an exciting possibility. Trepidatious, of course, and also very exciting. So thank you for leading on this front. Exciting times.
Thank you all. I really appreciate all those different comments and questions and thoughts.
we look forward to hearing from you again on AI in the future so that we can find out how it all went.
Perfect.
All right, great. We're going to move next to,
I can't help but make a comment.
yes, please.
So, I mean, if we're looking for problem solvers, problem fixers, so what? My son's generation were the problem makers?
No, that
Occurred to
is not by me.
So, yeah, that's about right.
Well, there,
Oh, no, they were problem makers. I know. It's okay.
perhaps it's, I think different student, people have different phases of their lives. I imagine. Yes, they're getting it out of their system, Christine. That's what they're doing. They're getting it out of their system. All right.
Actually, our next speaker too said she's.
Yes, I noticed that. Okay, so the Hopkins Academy Program of Studies, April, can you take us through?
Sure, again, I don't have a fancy presentation for this one. I just have the summary sheet, but I'll just try to highlight what really the biggest changes are, because overall there's no changes to any of the policies around GPA or anything like that. I did make one minor graduation credit adjustment, which if it's a problem, I can push it back. But with the change of the schedule, we no longer have a 2.5 credit art option. So I changed the credits to match the 5 credits. It's always a minimum of 5 credits. So that was changed purely scheduling reasons, not any other reason. But none of that stuff was changed. The major changes to the program of studies for this next fall have to do with a lot of course and programming additions. So there's a lot of new courses in Project Lead the Way and in AP. And then some of the programming that we have had, we either updated or added more information. So for example, all of the pathways are now in there, the career innovation pathways. We added some information to describe what each one is a little bit more and to provide examples of careers so that students have that information in the program of studies. We added information about the seal of biliteracy, which we've been talking a lot about, and was sort of mentioned in the world language section, but there wasn't a separate piece for that in the program of studies. So we added that to the program of studies. We made sure we had that new MCAS competency determination process that we have to have. So that's updated in there. And then we also added some information about Campus Without Walls, which I'm not sure. Look at Annie, how much you all know about that or have talked about that. So I can summarize that briefly if that's helpful to people. So Campus Without Walls is an exciting opportunity that we have. We were one of 9 schools, I believe 9 school districts across the state who were selected to have this sort of shared coursework in teaching. So every school has a teacher and a course that they are sharing, and students from any of those other schools, if it works for their school and their schedule, are able to take our course, and our students are able to take the courses that they're offering. This year, we have been planning that work, and next year, we're going to pilot that. So Lindsay Roberts is teaching our course, our Myth and Indigenous Cultures course. That's the course that we will be sharing next year. And then our students will have access to the other courses. We're going to have to do what we always do and get creative if our students want to take some of those courses, because they don't line up exactly with our schedule, but we have a lot of thinking about how to make that happen, like we always do. So when they said, what courses do you want to offer your students? I said, offer them all. And if a kid wants to take it, we'll figure out how to make that work for them. So I'm excited to roll it out in the fall. I think it'll be a learning process for sure, right? We could have a snow day and they don't have a snow day. And so there's a lot of stuff to work out on the technical end, which Annie knows I've sort of been pestering them about. I had another hour-long meeting with them today of like, let's figure this thing out. So I guess that's maybe helpful to them that I'm there for that reason. But, I want it to work. And I think a lot of it will be, people will just have to be flexible, right? Like we'll figure out that. So that program's in there. We have the one class that we're offering. We're excited to have that opportunity. DESE is in support of that. So students will get regular credit for any of those courses that they're taking. We don't have their courses listed in our program of studies. There's a separate supplement, which I'm now realizing you guys probably have to approve. So I might have to bring that back to you in June to approve that supplement for those courses. See, this is a learning process. But our course that we're sharing now is in our program of studies. So maybe I'll just have you approve the courses our students are interested in. And then either way, I'll talk to Annie later. We'll figure that piece out. But that's the Campus Without Walls component. So again, mostly it's just adding that we're offering a 10th grade AP English class called AP Seminar. That will be new for us. We're going to line it up with the AP Research class in place of AP Language the following year. And students will have the ability to take those two courses and get the AP capstone that way. We also are offering a Project Lead the Way capstone course, which we are hoping to use for any of our students who are interested in a capstone. And if DESE has their way and requires a capstone for everyone, we'll line us right up for having that all set and squared away in the future as well. So we have all of that in there. We added some language about MyCap. And then, of course, people did sort of very basic, like offered, not offered updates and alternated those pieces out. A lot of, again, in the science department, new courses, automation and robotics in middle school, Project Lead the Way, environmental sustainability in the high school, along with not principles of engineering. There's very similar names. Introduction to engineering. This year we had principles of engineering, which is actually the second course in the sequence. Next year we're adding the introduction to engineering course, which is technically the first one in the sequence. So lots to add. The other big change actually that you should be aware of is that we are moving from physics in grade 9 to an integrated earth and space science class instead. That is another big change. So I should note that one for you. But any questions about any of that or anything else that you noticed?
Thank you for taking us through that. I have a quick question about Campus Without Walls, and that is, are these 9 schools in Massachusetts only? That's the first thing, yes. And then the other is, are these 2 semester long classes? So the full year class?
That's a great question. So I think that's another one where it depends on the school. There's still I guess I couldn't have really brought you the program supplement anyway. They're still trying to finalize the course offered times from all of the schools, and some schools have full year courses, some have semester. I'm not that worried about ours lining up to that because we do that now a little bit with GCC or internships. And I kind of anticipate trying to recruit students in that programming because for them it will be beneficial to have a class that has a stable time potentially, and then even for our students taking our course, it's going to have a stable time, and then they'll have to fill in the other days. So it's a bit of a scheduling challenge. I lost your question.
Well, that is totally sufficient. Not decided yet is a perfectly fine answer. And then a last question would be physics. Does that mean that physics is on the chopping block, or that it'll be offered at a different time?
So that means that currently we do not have a teacher who is licensed to teach physics, and we don't anticipate having one again next year. Certainly, if somebody is able to teach a physics course, we would offer an in-house one. What we have typically done for some advanced physics courses anyway right now is utilized VHS or encouraged, the partnership with GCC. It's been a little bit of a challenge to maintain the physics course. So for now, we've decided to move to a standard integrated earth and space science in freshman year.
There are very few secondary teachers. Very few people are licensed in that. That's another advantage of Campus Without Walls. Potentially.
Yes.
As saying we can guarantee access to students, we just had to be realistic.
Hopefully one of the 9 is offering their physics so that our students can take them. Very good. Thank you. All right. Those are the questions that I have. I will open it up to my colleagues. Christine, I see you're on mute, and I wonder.
So we're still going to have VHS.
Yes.
Correct. Okay.
Yep.
So this is how do I put, so where VHS is more student driven because they control when they're gonna study and when they're gonna do the coursework, et cetera. So the Campus Without Walls is more structured? Is that
Correct.
okay?
Yeah, so more structured. So VHS, right, doesn't have any synchronous sessions for students, but Campus Without Walls does. So they will have like structured, led by the teacher.
Mhm.
They'll all be our students will be in the classroom with headphones on and mics so that they can all participate simultaneously. There's been, back and forth conversations about whether or not the teacher can be in the room or not. I think they've landed with the teacher being able to be in the room at this point. But that the theory of the founders is that they are hoping to remove barriers and increase access by having schools be able to course share across the state in this way. So yeah, that is sort of the big, because I know you know more a bit about VHS on this end. One of those big differences, right? VHS is like you take your course and you do your coursework. You have your block in the schedule to work on your coursework, but you don't log in with a teacher right there.
Right.
With this one, you would log in with the teacher.
Okay. That I think it's actually an interesting concept because I think that some students need to have the immediate feedback. They need to have discussion and um not not just reading discussion, but actually hearing discussion. I know one of my sons, that was a big problem. Well, there's only one son, I should say, who was using it during COVID. So obviously, but um, he missed having the feedback that was instantaneous and to actually be bouncing ideas off of each other. And so I like the idea. I think
Yeah.
it could be very, very beneficial for students who do well with interaction.
Agreed. Thank you, Christine. And great to just round out our portfolio of options, giving students more options. As a small school, we're always looking for expanding the number of things they can take, number of topics, even the array of educators. So great that we're forming those partnerships. Thank you.
This just for a vote. I believe I put that in there.
Yes,
great.
return studies. Yes, please.
So do I hear a motion to approve the program of studies as presented?
So moved.
Thank you,
Seconded.
Christine. Thank you, Ethan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, April, for presenting it to us. We look forward to you coming back in case you need to present to us anything else about the Campus Without Walls program.
Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to move next to the superintendent updates. Annie, you've been busy.
Just want to highlight some students. Next time we get together, I'll have the names of the students. I forwarded you an email from Mr. Fazio about we had several award winners for the Hopkins students who recently competed. So I'll bring their names back. Really excited about our 8th grade student. And Malachi English Santiago, who won the state middle school world language essay contest this year. So that is really impressive. The essay is going to be displayed at the annual state conference for the Massachusetts Association of World Language Educators, and then it will be sent to the school so we can hang it in our hallways. Wednesday of this week, our 3rd graders, thank you, Mr. Jardin, for all of her efforts and leadership in this. Our wonderful esteemed 3rd grade will be on a video hearing with the Senate and the House of Representatives, I believe, listening to both bills, the Senate bill and the House bill. And so the joint committee I wrote here, assigned to the Joint Committee on State Administration and Regulatory Oversight. And so the students will be logging in to the hearing at 1 p.m. on Wednesday. I'm very excited about that.
That's great. And congrats also on the fundraising success that we're exceeding even last year's grant take. kudos to you and the team for applying and earning even more. And yeah, I think in today's fiscal times, those things count for a lot. So thank you for continuing to lean in on those efforts.
Absolutely, sure thing.
All right, moving to finances next, I believe. Chris, are you there?
I am here, yes.
Oh. You know what? Forgive me. I never asked my colleagues, Christine, Ethan, Paul, if you had anything you wanted to say about the superintendent updates. Okay, great. Now over to you, Chris.
Okay, so I have 3 reports for you, the same 3 we always see. First one is the revolving accounts. This one was a little tough. You know, with the earlier meeting, a lot of the revenues had not been posted yet by the town. So you can see lunch is actually in the negative because we're just missing an entire month of revenues being posted. The same with preschool, Hadley Kids, and school choice. So, you know, the dollar amounts that you see on here, expect them to go up by a pretty considerable amount when the report is updated. I'll update the April month ends and then the May month end at the next meeting. But I can certainly answer any questions anyone might have on the revolving accounts.
Any questions for Chris on the revolving accounts? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move to the next one, Chris. Let's see.
Okay, which is the expense report. So we have, you know, as is typically the case at this point in the year, we have a number of accounts that are showing negative balances. Some of that happens every year. And some of them, a good portion actually, are the result of I need to transfer the expenses over to grants, to circuit breaker, et cetera. You know, any kind of accounts like that that we are basically we've budgeted to use, but we just haven't used them yet. So I apologize. I just noticed that I'm pretty much sitting in the dark here. So you're hardly seeing my face, but yeah, so you know, obviously when June 30th rolls around, all of those transfers will have been made and we'll be in much better shape. I did want to point out just a couple of the dollar amounts that were considerably above where we thought we'd be, and that is in the maintenance area, where like heating, especially heating was the big one. We're $89,000 over what we budgeted for heating repairs, and that is really just a result again of the age of the heating system, where it seemed like, especially over the winter, seemed like every week or so we had people coming in to fix the boilers or the univents, or you know, then we had that big expense with the oil lines basically breaking down underground. So that is the result that you see in that particular area. So it's something we hope does not continue, obviously, but you know, that just kind of goes to show the need to upgrade that system in the near future. Any questions at all about the expense report?
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, that boiler has been on our capital list for some time. We've looked at alternatives, and I'm looking forward to the discussion around how we approach that in the future. But thanks for bringing our attention to that. Any questions for Chris on the expense report? Okay, we're going to move next to the grant allocation report.
Okay, so these are the grant expenses made through May 12th. So a few days ago, I ran this report. There are some additional journal entries that I've made, but have not been posted yet. The way we work these is I make the journal entries to transfer expenses from the general fund over to grant accounts, and I transfer them to the town accountant. Then she posts them, and once she posts them on the town side, I can post them on our side, and that way we always remain in sync, which is key. You know, when we try to reconcile with the town, it's often just a nightmare of, you know, you send over journal entries, but in the hundreds of emails the town accountant would get in the day, they got missed, or you know, there was all kinds of problems. So this was our solution, and so unfortunately she's been on vacation and now she's out for something else, so she told me she would get to those when she returns, and otherwise the grant expenditures that you see would be even a larger amount, but It has posted quite a bit of expenses to the grants since last month, and still $607,000 to go. So we have a considerable amount of transfers still to make.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Chris? Okay, thanks, Chris. We are, let's see, moving next to action items. Do I hear a motion to approve the school committee minutes of April 27th?
So moved.
Thank you, Ethan.
Second,
Second.
Thank you, Christine. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. We are going to approve the payroll and warrants for May 2026. Do I hear a motion?
so moved.
Thank you, Christine.
Seconded.
Thank you, Ethan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. We've already approved the Hopkins Academy program of studies. We're going to move to school committee updates and general announcements. Tara has dropped off. If she arrives before the end, we will get her update on CPAC and CES. On the finance side, I'm pleased to say that the town meeting was on May 7th, and the override successfully passed, which allows the schools to operate at a level services rate. And the really important matter here is that you need to go out and vote for the vote to approve the funding. And the date for that is, someone's going to have it handy. Tomorrow is the date for the town.
June 2nd is the override.
June 2nd, that's what it is. Yes, so for the viewing public, we need you to go out and vote on June 2nd for the override budget. If that does not get passed, we're going to be back in square one, and we don't want to be there. So please, please, please mark your calendars. I believe there's also early voting for this. I know, Annie, you circulated some helpful information. So if you're a parent, look for an email in your inbox from Ann McKenzie with information about voting. It's also available on the town website. Both tomorrow's vote on elections, we thankfully have Ethan Percy and Tara Brugger running for school committee seats again. And so that's tomorrow. And on June 2nd to support the override. Please, please, please go do that. And also tell your friends, tell your neighbors, we need this to pass. Okay, let's see. On the the next item is the ESCO biweekly meeting notes. Thank you, team, for sharing that, as well as the Hopkins Academy HVAC modernization project summary. Paul, can you give us a distillation of both?
Yeah, I'll just quickly, Annie and Chris chime in. So we meet biweekly with Trane, who is our ESCO, the energy services company. They're advising us on energy conservation measures in particular, but also the biggest thing is a replacement of that HVAC system in the Hopkins facility. So as Chris just mentioned, right, we spent an unforeseen $89,000 on really what's an antiquated system. So in their document that we have attached, they provide three options. So the HVAC Hopkins Academy modernization document is really helpful. There's three options they're reviewing: geothermal hot water conversion, sort of basically going back to steam with just an updated system, and then air source heat pump. And they line out the numbers, which I think are really helpful, the costs, potential incentives from the federal government and the state, and then the cost savings over time. And so one thing to look at is geothermal's the most expensive one, and we were hoping to receive some Green School Works grant from Mass CEC, and that, we were informed recently, did not come through. So in there they have several $1 million worth of incentives from the state, but that did not come through. So I think Annie and Chris, are we planning on coming back in June with a more formal, more complete presentation?
Yes, the way we imagined it is that in June, the school committee would kind of come to consensus on either rank order their options or come to consensus on what you think makes the most sense. Ultimately, it is the select board's decision about what goes on the warrant. This is something that would need to go on the warrant. What I envisioned was the school committee having a rather in-depth conversation about it, coming to consensus, and then coming to consensus, and then Chris and I would present to the select board. Amy Parsons, our liaison on this project, has been at the biweekly meetings, the select board liaison for the project, but we would present to the select board and see what their thoughts were on what project makes sense. Bring what the school committee, and of course anyone from school committee, or we could do a joint meeting, but we saw first you folks deciding, and we do that in June, and then going to the select board with potentially trying to look at maybe voting on this in the fall. Let's see.
And while it's disappointing not to receive the grant from the state for the geothermal, the air source heat pumps is still a very compelling, viable option, especially given the rates we buy electricity at. We can go more into that in June. We have some very competitive rates for our locale. And so we still have some really good options.
Terrific. I look forward to hearing back from you all at a future meeting. I would urge us also, if we can, to because having installed an air source heat pump in my own home, I know that our electric bill increased, which it should, right? Because that's cleaner energy. We have not gotten solar to bring down the cost. So it might be good to also keep in the back of your mind or in the presentation what our solar strategy would be, if anything at all, in order to make.
It's part of the conversation. It's part of the analysis. I can't say, I mean, off the cuff, it's a little bit of a hard stretch to get there, to make the numbers work in the timing. The tax credits are dissolving from a timeline, and so there's a clock ticking that's very fast.
Yes.
But we will definitely bring that to the June conversation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for Paul or Chris or Annie on that? Okay, let's keep moving. On the capital side, Christine, is there anything to report? Okay. And on the policy side, Ethan? Okay. Any general announcements from anyone? All right. Okay. Thank you.
Executive session here, but